Okay, so here we go. Well, I know I already said good evening and welcome to everyone. My name is Amanda Drosty. I know I've had the pleasure of meeting a few of you before, and I am one of the career services and job placement specialists here at We Can Code It. So tonight is really the finale of all the work that you have been doing in the different pre-skills workshops. And tonight we're here to draft a resume that's going to increase your chances of being invited to an interview and really showcases those new skills that you've learned over the course of these last several weeks, excuse me. And also throughout the evening, I'll also be talking a little bit about how you can showcase the new skills that you've learned for positions right now, but also if you're thinking about going to the next level and learning more about coding and software development, what those next stages might look like, what are job opportunities for you there? And we will be spending a lot of time actually working on that resume. Quick show of hands, who already has their own resume? All of you, yes. Okay, so hopefully then some of our work tonight will go pretty quickly. Now, there will be some differences in what you may have done before and what your old resume looks like and how we're going to craft it. There are going to be things we learn about tonight that you'll also be able to integrate into a resume for any type of job that you're looking at. So a little bit about our career services team. A few of you met Anu just a couple moments ago when she jumped in to just say hello and make sure that everything was going well for us tonight. She is our director of career services and community impact. And then we have another job placement and career services specialist, Lee Gamlin, who if you decide at some point to join our PreSkill bootcamp, you'll have the opportunity to meet them. A little bit about me. I have spent the last 20 years working in higher education, mostly in academic advising and orientation, helping students with their internships and a little bit with their career side as well, but also served as a hiring manager for many of those years. So really have a very keen eye on what people look for when they are reviewing those resumes and those cover letters and things like that. And I've been with We Can Code It now for the last 4 months. Really enjoy working with individuals who are looking for new career and educational opportunities and being alongside of everyone on their process. And I'm super excited to get to know each of you tonight. So we'll have some more time to chat along the way and you don't have to just listen to me the whole time. So I mentioned a little bit already about what we're doing tonight. Our real objective here is to develop that foundational resume that's going to meet the criteria of being read by what's called an applicant tracking system. Throughout the night, I'll use the shortened version ATS. An applicant tracking system is essentially a computer program that every time you upload your resume, it goes through this computer program and it's a computer that's looking for keywords and skills and experiences that match the job description, looks through it, vets that information before it even gets to a recruiter or a human set of eyes to look at it. So what we want to make sure is that we've not only got the written information that is correct, but the format that is correct too, because they are very tricky machines. And if you have one of those really beautiful, aesthetically pleasing resumes, like you go on Canva and do it, and you've got all these different tables and headers and footers, it's immediately going to get kicked out because it's not reading the information properly. So tonight, when we're working on that resume, it's going to be a very simple, plain look to it, not very aesthetically pleasing, but there is a point where you can utilize a more attractive view, depending on how you're applying for a position and the likelihood that it will go directly to a human as opposed to the ATS machine. tonight. So we're also going to talk about those job paths that connect with your new skills. And also for those of you who either want to learn more about becoming a full stack developer or just learn a little bit about the programs that we have, we'll have some time at the end of the evening for that as well. So you have all just kind of finished up your path in our PreSkill program. So as you all know, you've been with Zach for these last several weeks. You went through our introductory program to build those foundational skills, to build your confidence, hopefully, in this new world of coding and development and HTML and JavaScript. And I applaud you all because truth, I'm a little scared of those terms still, and maybe one of these days I'll be as brave as you all have been to do this. So why I want to take a minute to talk about this, I am not sure of what path each of you took, whether you've taken all of those introductory courses, the coding fundamentals, the intro to web development, the intro to software development, or you took a couple of them, mixed and matched based on what your needs were. But we're all ending tonight with this career advancement resume workshop. You will have the skills that are necessary to build those websites, to do that initial coding, and tonight learn how to put that all together and market yourself. But I mention this because it doesn't matter which of these paths you took. The information that I'm going to share this evening will really cover everything. We just may have to take out some pieces depending on what path you took for this. Zach may have already shared with you some of the kind of target entry-level roles for those newfound skills that you have. I will not read these all to you because I don't know about you, but my pet peeve is sitting through a presentation where someone reads the slides. Yes, 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 no, or if you really like it, I can do that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, Caroline, I love it. But here, with the skills that you all have learned over the course of these last several weeks, these are the types of positions that you may be able to start looking for, right? Because you have the skill sets, you've got that understanding. We've had people go on to be those HTML email developers, a social media manager. Be thinking about these types of things and where you are hoping to go with your skills, because that's going to be really important as we talk about your resume, and maybe even I'm available to you after tonight too, like if you want to talk about like what other opportunities as you're looking for jobs down the road, how do we integrate those skills into those positions that you are applying for. And we can always come back to this slide later this evening, but just know these are some of the things you can be thinking about. Okay, so to dive in, this first part is a little lengthy, so I will warn you in advance, but I think this is all some really, really important information. You all indicated earlier that you have a resume. So I think we all know what a resume is, but on the off chance that someone is watching that really hasn't had experience with a resume, and there are plenty of us that haven't, it is really that document that is created and used by an individual to present your backgrounds, your skills, and your accomplishments. They're used for a whole variety of reasons, but most often it's to secure new employment. A strong resume is really important because it's going to communicate your qualifications and really set you up for future career success. Resumes can look a lot of different ways and have a lot of different information, but the key pieces that we'll be focusing on are really looking at your contact information. We'll talk tonight and craft an introduction or personal statement, share that educational background, professional experience, as well as the relevant technical and interpersonal skills. We do want them to be eye-catching. That's really important. And we want them to be easy to read, and we want them to garner the attention of the hiring manager after they've made their way through the ATS. This can take a lot of different forms, and according to several studies though, on average, once a hiring manager gets your resume, they spend about 6 seconds per resume. And some of these same studies have also found that 80% of the hiring manager's attention during that 6-second time period is focused on your name, the employer names, the job titles that you've had, dates of employment, schools and education. So they're looking at all of those things that you can't change. Those are like the set in stone things, right? Who you are, what you've done. But what you can change about your resume, about that format, is the information about your skills, how you present that information, what you've done through both your educational and your work experience. That includes school, job, transferable skills, volunteer work is really important as well. And all of these things are transferable skills that are really, really important. And as we work to kind of cultivate that resume, and we're not going to do a cover letter tonight, but down the road, if you're ever looking at a cover letter, to really be able to catch that hiring manager's attention really quickly. We talked about the applicant tracking system already, so we do want it to be friendly. Really, anytime you are applying to one of those large corporations, you're submitting your resume through like Workday, for example, is one that you see often with different companies. More than likely, it's going to go through that applicant tracking system. If you're emailing your resume directly to the hiring manager, that's a little bit different because their eyes are going to see it first. And there's no way to know whether they're using an applicant tracking system or not. But it's always safest to have that ATS friendly resume if you are submitting it through any type of hiring system and not either directly handing it to it or sending it to them via email, something like that. 75%-ish are the number of resumes that are initially read by those applicant tracking systems. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we've got that format set tonight, which I'll be teaching you how to do. Are there any questions, concerns, comments before I keep going? Nope. Okay, good. We'll just keep going along then. So tonight, the must-haves on the resume. It is really, really straightforward, but sometimes these must-haves are the things that get away from us on occasion. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I want you all to know this evening is that there really is no such thing as a perfect resume, right? I don't believe in perfection, so there's no perfect resume. It's always a work in progress. You can go online and there are probably thousands of opinions on how to write a resume. And even then you can kind of take that to another level and there's even more opinions about how to write specific resumes for specific types of jobs and industry. We're not going to worry about all of those things tonight. But I think the one thing that everyone does agree on is that this information that I'm going to share with you here right now on this slide absolutely must be correct. That being said, we've all had a resume boo-boo before. Back in the day, I spelled the institution I was applying to wrong. I was real embarrassed about that. Yep, never happened again. But those are the things that it's really helpful to have someone else look at it or read through it. Put it down before you look at it again, because right, we get so tunnel vision on these things and there's going to be errors on occasion, but we're going to do our best to mitigate that. So a couple of things: proper spelling and grammar. Spell check is really good about catching all of those typos and misspellings, especially if you're using Microsoft Word or like Google Docs. I really love I'm going to pop in the chat here. Oh, sorry. I've got multiple screens here, so now I'm like, where are things popping up? I just put in the chat the website that I really love. It's called Grammarly, and there's a plugin that you can utilize, which is really wonderful for, there might be another term for it, I think it's plugin, that when you're filling out like web documents or any type of, like you're writing a paper on a course management system. The tool will come in and not only check your grammar and your spelling, which is really nice, but it will also help you with the tone of what you're writing. So like if you have it connected with your email, I know it's saved me a few times from emails that I thought were just like, hey, here's the information you need. But then I got the little frowny face that was like, this seems really angry. I was like, oh, okay, let me check that. I tend to be just really direct in my emails. So it's really nice because it will do that for you as well. So if you're, especially if you're using Google Docs, it'll integrate into that. I highly, highly recommend Grammarly. It is free. There are paid options of it, but I've just always used the free version, and it is really, really wonderful. If you don't want to use that, that's fine. I already mentioned earlier, just have someone else look at it for you. Have a couple of people look at it for you. The other thing I would recommend that's going to seem a little silly, and I always like cringe a little bit when I'm doing it myself, is read it out loud to yourself. Every single word. I promise you, it makes a huge difference, and you will catch things that you would not have caught otherwise. So I highly recommend taking the time to do that. Okay, that was a lot about spelling and grammar, but it is a pretty significant part of your resume. Very, very important because correct spelling and grammar, really, they will judge you on that right away. I hate to use the word judge, but if those things aren't on point, you have lost your shot. I see Kyle, you nodding there, you know that is the case. So anyways, we also want to have very standardized formatting. I know that sometimes we try to cram as much on a page as we can, like how small can I get that font? How small can I make the margins? No space between things. But remember what we talked about earlier. There needs to be enough white space on the page and enough space between our words and our paragraphs and our sentences that the hiring manager can scan through it very easily, right? That they can see those keywords that they're looking for. In this ATS-friendly resume, we are really avoiding the fancy designs and the colors and the charts because it really won't pass through an ATS machine. And true story here. I was working with one of our graduates not too long ago, and they sent me this wonderful resume, beautiful resume, like all formatted in all these different ways. They were like a web designer, very like artsy, and it was really beautiful. I wanted to make some edits and I wasn't going to make it on that document. So I just copied the whole thing, pasted it onto a plain document, and recognized right away why this individual hadn't been making it to a recruiter. And it's because there were so many tables and columns in the document that once it got cut and pasted onto just a plain doc, words were cut off like midway. So even though all the correct words were there, they were only there in partial form. So right away, it was the format that was keeping this individual from being able to get an interview, not because they didn't have the skills. So real world, it happens. It's happened to me too before I even knew about this whole ATS thing, because it is, while it's not relatively new, the technology has become more sophisticated than it had in the past, and more individuals are using it. So really, we're going to look at a couple notes if you want to take them down when you're working on your resume. You really want to have no smaller than like 1/2 inch, 0.5 inch margins, and that's top, sides, bottom, no headers and no footers. That's really, really important to know because that information doesn't get read properly. Font size should really be no smaller than 11. I know that feels maybe really big depending on what your experiences have been. And like no larger than 12 for text within the body. Now, if you've got some headings and things like that, those can be a little bit larger. But that 11 and 12 font point font is really going to be the easiest for them to read. Using bold font is okay. Using bullet points are okay. Just remember, no tables, no columns, no headers or footers. We're really just trying to get the information across. And you want to also make sure that you're using a single font throughout. I know that in some resumes, you'll see multiple fonts that are being used, different fonts for heading, different fonts for the body, different fonts for the subheading. It's really not necessarily necessary. It's not going to set your resume apart from anyone. And let me tell you, there's a whole science behind selecting the correct fonts and making sure the types of fonts match the sans, serif, whatever they all are. So if you are not a font expert, just stick with the one. I tend to recommend using either Calibri or Arial. I personally like Calibri. I think it's a little bit easier to use, but Calibri or Arial are going to be just fine. Other thing about resume length. Now, kind of depending on your situations, what your experience has been, what type of job you are applying to, we might discuss different things, right? But in general, your resume should really be only 1 to 2 pages long. For any of the like entry level, like a developer job, or even some of those other positions we looked at earlier, we're really just 1-2 page max, and 2 pages is pushing it a little bit. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If you are applying for like a government job, or you've spent a lot of time in education. My education resume was like 4, 5, 6 pages long. Let's talk about how ridiculous and unneeded that is. But that is what they did in that field, in that industry. You also see that in government jobs, or if you've had a lot of experience, it might go past the 2 pages, and we can talk about that one-on-one. But what's important to know and think about tonight as you're working on your resume is talking about your experience is, what is the experience that's relevant to the position that I'm applying to, and making sure that we can make those connections between the two. Standard headings, we want to use the type of headings that we're going to see across the industry. We don't have to be like cute and get creative here unless you are applying for a job that would require that. I don't think we're talking about that tonight. But you'll see when I share our template with you that we are looking at very standard, simple things: work experience or professional experience, education, skills. It seems like it's very bare bones, which it is, but those are the things that the ATS machine is looking for. It's also what a recruiter is looking for. What's your education? What's your experience? They don't want to have to search for it, essentially. The other thing we're going to talk a little bit about is keyword optimization. So I mentioned earlier that the applicant tracking systems are always looking for keywords. These are the words that you're seeing over and over in the job description. So it is so important to pay attention to what they're looking for in the job, and then make sure it's in your resume. As much as we would love to only have one resume for every single job, the truth is that we do have to update it a little bit. But one of the things that when I'm working with my group of individuals is that we really try to make a really solid foundation and structure, and know where are the areas that we might need to go in and make some adjustments. And so little bonus information for you tonight. Even if you're not looking for a job right now, you're pretty comfortable where you're at, or you're figuring things out, but you think down the road, I want to be in XYZ field. Start looking at those job descriptions now, because then you'll be able to internalize what words are in those job descriptions most often, and not just the hard skills, but those interpersonal skills, the pieces that maybe you need to develop in your own toolbox. That's a way that you can really get ahead and then start incorporating them into your current resume. Start looking for additional opportunities in your own kind of worlds right now to increase those skill sets. Or is there a new technology that you need to learn, or a new skill? So that's one of those things I really, when you're bored one day, instead of scrolling Instagram, look at job descriptions. I don't know. I do it just for fun. It's also my job to look at job descriptions. So it really, really is helpful. You learn a lot about the industries in the field as you're looking at those different job descriptions. But anyway, so the other trick about keywords, though, is not just throwing them in the resume and making sure that you've got keywords all over the page. Yes, we want them to be there, but we also want them to be used purposefully. And so that's something that's really, really important. Another key piece of bonus information: never put anything on your resume that you're not prepared to talk about. Right? Because they will ask you directly about something that you have on your resume, or they might ask you a long-winded question based on something that you've put there to get a sense of your competencies or your ability to problem solve. Or do you really have this skill that you're talking about? And then finally, really the big rule of thumb is that when you are submitting those documents online or you're emailing it to someone, make sure that you are using a Word doc, a Google Doc, or really I recommend putting it in a PDF. These days it's so easy to do that. You really just print to PDF, save it, send it along the way. And then that way you know that the formatting is not messed up. ATS reader can read through it and everything is good. Okay, I promise I'm almost done with the first talking part. We're going to get into things and give you a little break, because I don't know, later in the night, I need way more breaks than I need during the day. How about y'all? Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Maybe ice cream. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so as we go along, I will be sharing with you here in a few minutes. I know that might be a little small on your screen, but in just a moment, I'm going to drop in the chat a link to our PreSkill resume template. So give me just a moment to do that. And I know that you probably did not need me to type out these instructions, but just in case, I'm a very visual person. It's late at night. I need reminders too. These are going to be the steps for each of you to access it and save it. So if you want to just go ahead and take a moment to click on the link in the chat, it is going to pull up our We Can Code It template that was developed by, I believe, our director and Lee created this, I think, and we'll edit it. And remember, this is a template. We'll be making edits to it. Even after tonight, you and I can work together to customize it, because we can't get everything done in 3 hours, right? And I don't think any of us want to stay here past 3 hours tonight. If you really do, I would stay. I would stay for you now. Kyle, you're shaking your head. I feel you. So go ahead, click the link. I think this is a protected document, so you'll want to click on File from the toolbar, make a copy of it. I would just recommend doing like your first initial, last name, tech resume, and then go ahead and click that share button so you can share it with me. You may have to also adjust it so that I have editor view if you want me to look at it later and throughout the evening, and we'll be able to make adjustments on it in real time. Another pro tip: anytime you apply for a job, I recommend doing this first initial, last name, and then like, where are you applying? A. Drosty, Progressive Application 2022. That way you can always find it. Also, you can make sure you're uploading the correct resume to the correct job. That is also very important these days. So does everybody have that document? And then I'm going to go through here and kind of share with you what we're going to work on in this first section. Yes. Okay. So give me a moment to swap screens. Okay. Are you all still, oh, let's see. Oh, Caroline, I think I've got you writing on my original here. That's okay. It happens every workshop. It's all good. Um, my favorite part of Google Docs is how everybody gets these random animals at the top. It's super, super fun. Um, can you all see the resume on your screen? Are you still seeing the slideshow resume? Okay, perfect. So in this next section here, we are going to just work on a couple of specific areas. We're going to just kind of knock this out in sections tonight. So when we are working on this evening, what I want you to do is really just focus on filling in the basic information. First name, last name. You should see me highlighting here. We're going to put our contact information on there. You'll notice I do not have a place for you to put your address, only put city, state. They don't need your address. With phone numbers too, personal preference, you can put your personal phone number there. You also can sign up for a Google Voice account, which is free, and then you don't have to be putting your personal phone number out there. If you have a LinkedIn URL, put that up there. And this section here that says link to personal portfolio, I think you all you have CodePen, right? Repositories that you created in class. That would be a great place to put that URL right there. And then I want you to work on that. And then I want you to start thinking about your professional summary and kind of playing around with that here in this first bit of time. You'll see written on the document really just 2 to 3 sentences about who you are. I really love to consider to write mine in that past, present, future. Who were you and what were you doing? But tie in those skills, right? Not just, hi, my name is Amanda and I'm super excited about your position. But I was playing around with this myself earlier, and something like, you can see I have a different version here now, but recent introduction to programming graduate, eager to add value in an entry-level developer position. And then, you know, I put some other things here. That is not the one you want to use because I like to write stuff and then go back and edit it. But this kind of gives you an idea of what you want to do. That is going to be the very first thing that the hiring manager looks at, right? So who are you? What are your skills that are relevant to that position? And how are you going to be a good fit for that organization maybe? Or why are you making this leap to a new position? We don't need a job objective. If you're applying for a job, we know you want a job there, right? I want to know more about who you are and maybe why this job specifically, and how are your skills and talents going to set you apart from everyone else. But again, we don't want it to be lengthy. So that's really where I want you to spend the majority of this initial time tonight with this first break. We have 3 breakouts, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So you have those documents there. Yes, name, all that information. I don't have on here the thinking about that profile information, but go ahead and put that summary of yourself on there. Go ahead and just put education on there, anything that you've done, any licensures, any credentials, schooling and graduation dates, or anticipated graduation dates. Right now, we're just putting it all on there, and then we'll start editing that out. Oh, I've got something in the chat, just a second. Can we zoom in? Lox, did you want me to zoom into the original resume? Yes, okay, let me go back to it. Was it for the like the personal description? Or was it this one here? I can zoom. The one I have up, or this one? Oh, this one here. Like that part? Yes. And so he's looking at that. I love wordsmithing, y'all. So please, sorry, that was my Texas coming out. I love to wordsmith. So don't worry about what the format is or what's there. We'll work through it together. And we can come back to this here too, Loxley, no worries there. So go ahead, get working on this. For the employment experience part, don't worry about filling in what all your tasks were or responsibilities right now. I just want you to focus on what were those jobs. I think for now, depending on what season of life you are in, you may have 5 to 10 years of experience, 1 to 5 years, 1 to 20 years of experience. For now, let's just do like the past 10 years. The caveat to that being, if you have something from your earlier professional experience, like maybe 15 or 20 years ago, that might be relevant, you could go ahead and list it, and we can talk about whether or not it's something that you would need to include. So I'm going to pause here. Let me stop the recording. Give me a second. I'll leave that up so you all can see it. I'm going to pause. Okay, so we are back, and we have all just finished that breakout section 1, where we kind of got some of the nuts and bolts of our resume and started thinking a little bit about that personal statement, which we'll come back to, and we have the opportunity to work kind of one-on-one, if you will, as we go along. So there are a couple of different ways that you can kind of elevate the work of your resume. And right now, kind of what we're doing in these initial stages is working on what I like to call our foundational resume. We're really making sure that it is error-free. Our bulleted information is going to be more job description to get us started. We'll talk about responsibilities, but we're going to update those later. We're not looking quite yet at a results-based resume, but we're going to move along towards that and talk before the end of the evening how to do that. So I like to call this first version foundational. It's a good, strong, foundational resume. But then what we want to do is take it to the next level. And this is where I call it our elevated resume, where we are really trying to make sure it's still error-free, but we're starting to talk more about our results in our positions and the experiences that we've had, and not just talking about the what of our job, what we did. We're going to start thinking about what were some of those major projects that you had or major contributions. And when we can, where can we put qualitative or quantitative results, right? It's one thing to say I did XYZ, which is fine, but how can we then take that and say I did XYZ, which resulted in a 200% growth in whatever it is we were growing, right? Like audience participation, something like that. Because that then again shows this is what you actually did, how you did it, and what were the results or the outcome. And I recognize that that takes a little bit of time, a little bit of brain power, and maybe way more caffeine than we want to have at 7 o'clock at night, unless you're a night owl. So those are the things that we'll think about tonight, get started, but really, really requires you to sit down, think about those positions that you had, and really dive into a reflection of what did I do and what did I accomplish, and that was outside of my day-to-day, or maybe those things that were great accomplishments, but they happened a bit ago and you've already moved on from them, right? It takes a minute these days to remember all of the great things that we've done. Tonight, I'll share with you what I consider the optimal resume to be. Well, not what I call the optimal resume. Let's put it that way. None of us are ever going to really be at that, sharing an optimal resume 100% of the time. And I say that because even though it is incredibly strong, it's incredibly informative and, a step above that elevated resume, It takes a considerable amount of time and effort, and there's just really a limited amount of incremental value if you've got that really strong foundational resume that has then been elevated. So there may be some aspects of what you've done that we try to really optimize, but for the most part, we are not concerned about making every single piece of the resume optimal in a way that I'm going to show you next. We really just want your resume to read well, to describe what you have done, and really showcase all those skills. And truth be told, an optimal resume is often overkill in a lot of situations and just has more information than is needed, and sometimes might feel a little, yeah, just too much or maybe not authentic, right? But we are going to want to think about how we incorporate some of those pieces in a way that feels really natural and authentic to who you are and what you're trying to do. Um, Even in my resume, I've got a lot of years of resume work, y'all, but I don't really optimize a lot of the sections because it does just feel like too much and that I'm trying to sell a product instead of share who I am and why I would be a fit. But again, that piece is my perspective. So that in kind of my philosophy. So take that as you will or not. You don't have to keep that particular piece there as we're going along. So this section, we're really moving into another breakout here, because this is really going to take some time and some thought, and I'm here to kind of discuss these different pieces with you. But what we're going to do is we're going back to that resume that we were working on earlier. And I recognize with all of the preloaded information about your projects that we are going to go to a page 2. So do not worry about that tonight. I'm going to come back and talk about how you will utilize those projects, kind of depending on what type of job you're applying for. Right now, they're there to kind of help you remember what those projects were. I know with Zach taking over the course, there may have been a few changes, so we may need to edit some of those project descriptions anyways. The other piece too to think about those projects are, just because those are all of the projects that you did, those may not necessarily be the ones that you want to showcase with a significant amount of space on your resume. So those are some things that I want you to be thinking about tonight. And it may be different for the different jobs that you're applying for, but it's an area that we can kind of whittle down a little bit, but for tonight's purposes, they're good to have there for memory, things like that. So anyways, we're going to go back to the resume this evening and continue to work on that statement from earlier. I know sometimes when you walk away from it, you might think of some things, that personal statement that's at the beginning. And then what I want you to do is spend some time thinking about the responsibilities for each of those positions that you've had. Now, you can do this in a couple of different ways. I would recommend first off only having like 3 to 4 bullet points as to what those responsibilities were for those previous positions, and really be targeted in what type of information you're putting there. It might be challenging to think about, well, what would be the best way for me to articulate what I've done in my positions? Google's your best friend. So if you've had a job and you're like, I know I did these things, I know I did other things, but how can I write them in a way that's more than just I did XYZ? Google job description for whatever your job was, or there have been occasions, truth be told, I don't know how to describe every job that a student of mine has had, so I do the Google as well. But I think what is safe to say and to consider, that if you've had a position where it's a pretty well-known position, right? You were a firefighter. People know, or they think they know what firefighters do. You don't have to necessarily put those functions of the job that everyone knows about, but how can you go in and talk more about those responsibilities that have some weight to them that someone may not understand right off the bat, right? That's really, I think, where we can do ourselves the most favors when we're working on our resume. And if you're not sure tonight, just put them all on there, and then that's something that you and I can work on and kind of edit out, whether that's tonight or at a future time. But put those on there and see what you come up with. Maybe not put it word for word, but put it in your own voice. And like I said, really look at the top three most important responsibilities. I think you have a little flexibility here depending on the types of jobs you've had or volunteer experience. Maybe there's a job that you don't have as many things that you really want to talk about. And so maybe it's only a couple, but you've had a lot of responsibility in another position. You can do that, just kind of maybe two for one position, four for another. But remember, what showcases your abilities the best? Both the technical skills and the interpersonal skills and competencies. So things like time management, customer service. Was there a project that you were responsible for that had a significant outcome? Did you manage a team of individuals or provide mentorship or training on occasion? Those are the types of things that we would really want to see and that a hiring manager would want to look for, right? This is another place where I mentioned earlier when we're talking about responsibilities and later accomplishments, how can you connect those responsibilities that you've had to this new position that you might be applying for? And so that's why I always say, look at those job descriptions, get an idea, because then you know how to word those things in a way that maybe it's not the exact same experience, but it's those transferable experiences and skills, which takes some time. Recognize that, and so we can work on those together along the way. I'll come back to this slide. Oh, I'll leave it here. I lied. So take those pieces. I'll highlight here on the resume the areas that we're working on. Oh, got someone there. But again, we're going down to, oh, I got someone's resume. We'll go to this one here. Down here, if you can see, this is where we're now going to put in these responsibility statements. What did you do? Put the city, the dates. If you want extra credit, actually it's not extra credit because you're going to do it later and you already have those responsibilities and you want to think about accomplishments, you can do that now as well. This is a section of the evening where I am, well, the whole evening I'm available, but I'm really here to work one-on-one on your document with you if you would like. So if you've already got some of those things there and you want to figure out, how do I elevate this or how might I reword this? Just send me a quick message and then we can look at the document together. I can be working on it while you're looking at it, or again, I want to be totally respectful of everybody's like styles and things like that. If you're the type of person who likes to get it all done and then send it off and I can look at it later, I'm happy to do that too. It's really choose your own adventure, if you will, but I am here to help you with that. So really, we're just resume template, put in those responsibility statements for your past experiences. If you're not sure kind of how to describe your jobs, you can do a Google search for it, super simple, and then put just those three most significant responsibilities and try to think about the jobs that you're interested in the future and try to connect those responsibilities to what you believe those other jobs might require or look like. Okay, any questions? I made up for talking so much in the first session with this one. All right, so I will stop the recording again. This one is always a little bit harder to know how much time you will need. So I'm gonna check in with you all probably in like 20 minutes or so, but please take your time. I've given us really like 45 minutes for this section, depending on how many jobs you've had, how much time you need. If you get to a point where you're like, hey, I'm done, let's move this along, send me a quick chat message and we can continue moving. But 20 minutes for now. We've got up to 45, but I'll do a status check with you here in just a bit. Okay, awesome. Oh, and don't forget to ask questions if you've got any. Okay, so before I move into our kind of third and final resume section, before we talk more about like software developer jobs and boot camps and next steps, are there any questions that anyone has for the group? I know a few of you were messaging them to me, and that's absolutely perfect too. But is there anything that popped up from what I've shared with you already or complete
Question.
Yeah, Janae.
So for like people who are transitioning out of their career and this developing in tech is completely different from what they used to do, me. How would you notate that in like your even the section, your statement that so I have right now, like I'm an established in what I did in the past, but how would I say this is what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, so I think kind of going back, I'm gonna stop sharing here so I can kind of see you all. So I think that is where you'll really want to utilize, yeah, that is a good question, Mark just put there. That's where you'll want to utilize that personal statement to kind of share what those past experiences were, right? I am an accomplished person in whatever field you were in, specializing in whatever those gifts and talents that you had, right? Those skills that you cultivated. And then something to the effect of now moving into software development where I can combine my creativity, project management into, and then you wordsmith it into the position that you're looking for. So it's a little bit of, and that's super vague, I recognize, without having like the specific job and or like the job that you're looking at, what skills we're trying to highlight. But that's really what I always recommend to do in that personal statement. You know, you're sharing who you were, what you used to do, how accomplished you were, what are those selling points about yourself, right? About the skills and the abilities that you want to have at the forefront, but also making sure, like I said earlier, and I now sound like a broken record, connect to the job that you want. So you still have some time, especially that's where looking at those job descriptions really come in handy kind of down the road, right? As you're thinking about making that switch. Are you thinking about doing the full boot camp or
Yes.
utilizing that? Okay. So that I was just telling, actually I was talking to Caroline earlier today and Anne and Pat, like this workshop, actually you all are who are going into the full stack boot camp are going to be like way ahead of everyone else, because while this is typically delivered by someone else, a lot of the content is the same. So what you are doing tonight, well, you're going to be pretty much done with that foundation of your resume. And then as you are in the boot camp, are going to have the ability to now take what you are taking in the boot camp and then articulate it within your resume even better, because you've done all of this other work. So that was a long answer, but really it's just being authentic to who you are, what you did, and why you want to move into this field. And I always say being passionate about that move is important, and being vulnerable is too strong of a word for this particular kind of situation, but being willing to write something there about who you are, what you've done, and what you want to do in a way that engages or potentially engages an interviewer in conversation.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm happy to look at it too. That's really where becomes fun. And it looks different for every person because you've all had such different experiences. But I absolutely guarantee you, and I don't really guarantee a lot of things, so maybe I shouldn't say guarantee, but I'm like 99% guarantee that no matter what your past experiences have been, we can tie to the skills that you've learned in the pre-skill, meld them together to whatever those new opportunities are that you are looking at. And for those of you who are going into the full stack boot camp, how do we then take those and tie them to software developer positions or, DevOps positions, which we'll talk all about more later. And you guys are going to be all in great shape when boot camp starts. You're going to be like, I know all this now. Now I get to just really work on making this the best it can be. But that was an excellent question, Janae. And so can't wait to look at it and work on it with you specifically and really make it beautiful. Okay, so let me share this again. And y'all can tell that my brain is starting to get a little tired from this workshop. So just bear with me from the evening. Fun story. Sorry, nobody who watches this in the future is going to care. Maybe you don't either. I was checking on my children. They're older. They're old enough to take care of themselves. Went into the bathroom. There's water all over the floor. Like, I don't know how my 12-year-old can't shower. I don't understand. So in this case, I'd much rather be with y'all than deal with whatever that was. So fun times. Hopefully y'all are having some good moments too. So let me keep going here. Share my screen again. Y'all have been really fun, and thank you for being engaged and cameras on tonight. You don't have to, but it really helps a lot. It makes a big difference. So okay, back to screen sharing. We are going to move along here to this last resume section that I promised you all. Okay, so we've just finished up that kind of foundational resume. We've got the basics there that we are working on. And now we're going to try to take a little bit of time to elevate it a little bit to the best that we can this evening at almost 8 o'clock at night and before I turn into a pumpkin, but maybe you all too. So we're now going to focus on those accomplishment statements, like I alluded to, just flat out told you earlier. And where can we really be specific about highlighting those strengths and those talents and those abilities that you have and get away from just the basics of your jobs, right? Get away from the responsibilities. Responsibilities have a place, but how do we elevate them? That's what's going to be so important here. So we're talking about that impact you made, like I mentioned, and this is really what is going to take your resume to the next level. And like I said, elevate it, make you stand out in the pack, because that hiring manager is going to have a better sense of who you are, not just what your skills and your day-to-days are, but how you are able to take those skills, those responsibilities, and really, again, make an impact. So if you get lost in any part of this process and, well, I do this in my job, think about what is the impact that you made? What was the impact of the project? Whose life did you change or impact? That might be a little grandiose, but like, what kind of difference occurred because of the work that you put into something, a change for the organization, a better, more efficient process. Those are other things to be thinking about there. So with your responsibilities, like we worked on earlier, those are often pulled from the job description, right? I did XYZ. I was responsible for XYZ. With our accomplishment statements, it is still okay to intertwine them with some of those responsibility statements. If you're kind of wondering how to differentiate the two, think about the responsibility statement. Oftentimes we'll have those, they start with responsible for, or in charge of, oversaw, coordinated, assisted with, collaborated. Those are all great words and they have a place on your resume. But again, how do you take what you were responsible for or collaborated on and really highlight yourself? What was the functional impact of that work that you did? Um, so I know I'm just telling you a lot of the same things we've already been talking about, but it's really, really, really important to, as you are working through these things, to think about, how was I the best at this particular function? And if you find yourself thinking, well, I don't know how I was the best at that, maybe it's time to look at another one of those responsibilities of your job where you did have a significant impact, right? So that's why this is a long process sometimes. And the other thing to think about too, and I know I had you look at Google and like write down what those responsibilities are. Um, Especially this day and age, there's a whole lot of responsibilities and things that we are supposed to do, or things that are written in our job descriptions that we perform and perform well. And there are all those other things that are not listed in the job description that consistently get added to our daily responsibilities at work. So what, if you were in a situation where somebody left and then you absorb those responsibilities, or some of those responsibilities, even though it may have had nothing to do with your original position, you want to incorporate those in there, right? Give credit to that work. So really be thinking about those things. And I know it can be really hard to remember what those were if you were constantly absorbing other people's tasks along the way, or things that maybe you started to do that were so routine that it's just ingrained in who you were and doesn't seem like it's an extraordinary feat, but it really was, because you are a superhero and superhuman in those tasks that you're doing in your job. And I giggle a little, but I'm being serious, because I think every single one of us has that in our life somewhere where we are actually working way outside of what we think our capacity is. So we want to get very specific, talk about those accomplishments, move away from what are those were supposed to do, and even though you did them, but what were the other things that you did? Again, those project key action items for some of those events or projects or initiatives, or again, going back to, was there a process that you streamlined or developed? Was there a significant maybe presentation, or were you always stepping up to the plate in an incredibly dependable manner, covering for others, right? How, put that down, and then we can kind of tease out, how do we elaborate on that even more, when we're all a little more awake and more functioning um, in our earlier morning days. Okay, so this is a very, very kind of crazy example here, but I think it gives a really good idea of the differences between kind of that foundational resume, the elevated resume, and the optimal resume. And this is one where I'll actually kind of read it, because there's nothing else for me to add to it, but it's really pretty straightforward, and you can really sub in any responsibility that you've had. Right now, it's just a marketing budget and $500,000. I don't really know what that looks like, but maybe someday all of us will, right? When you get those software developer checks someday. I don't know. We'll see, right? It'd be nice. Okay, so foundational, responsible for a marketing budget of $500,000. Excellent. That is significant in and of itself. That would impress me. It would impress anybody, especially if you're going to apply for a job that has some budgeting responsibilities or marketing responsibilities, right? But we can make it better. That just says what you were responsible for. Were you actually any good at it? You could be responsible for a $500,000 budget and, lose it all. I don't know, depending on your field. So they've taken this next one, analyzed advertising channels to optimally allocate $500,000 marketing budget. So that's way better, because it tells us not only what they did with that money, but how they did it, the specifics of what they were using that money for and how they used that money. But there's still a little bit more that we can do there, right? It's still a little functional in nature. And so while this next one is really a great example, you can also see how that optimal resume we don't want this for every single thing that we've done because it just then becomes a little bit too much. But optimize $500,000 marketing budget by analyzing historical returns and increasing budget to highest return channel, increasing profits by 22%. That is awesome. Really great. Is there a place for that on a resume? Absolutely. Could we also maybe put some of that information in a cover letter if there's a whole lot of that information? Yes. We also think in the future, which we won't talk about tonight, but LinkedIn. How do we utilize LinkedIn and our resume to really get our full story across? What's great about this particular optimal example, sorry, I'm looking at my other screen here, is that we know what he did, or the person, individual did. We know, I probably said he because it was my colleague that wrote this, so I'm probably just thinking about him. Um, we're thinking about the individual here, the marketing budget. They went really in detail about how they did the work that they were doing, and the outcome, and quantified the results. So that's what's really significant here. Anytime that we can quantify our results is something that's really significant too. And it's not always possible, which we'll talk about. Like maybe you're in a position that you don't have any budgetary or monetary responsibility, and we don't expect that all of the time. So what if you don't have numbers in your particular position? This is where, again, knowing what you did in your job, and also not only what you did in your job, but what is standard across the industry where you are, is really important. So other things that are just as significant, if not more so, maybe sometimes than a budgetary responsibility, is reducing risk is something that's super important. I mentioned efficiency early on, simplifying tasks, knowledge. Accuracy is something that's really, really important. We only have a limited amount of time and we need to get things right. So those are the types of things that, what do you look for in your day-to-day or in your responsibilities? And the hiring manager is going to be looking for those too. And then there's also those interpersonal or self-management skills. These are very basic examples, but like getting things done, you're very punctual, you're very productive. Now, I wouldn't recommend putting those particular words in your resume, but how do we take those competencies and again, tie them to your position and elevate them a little bit? But that's a good place to start, right? Start with the be productive. How are you productive? What were the results of your productivity? Write those down in whatever way that comes out of your brain, and then we can work together to, again, kind of vet it and make it look lovely. So always think about what the results were, but remember, it's not always a number, right? So there's all sorts of different resumes. Yours is incorporating a lot of different things, and it's not a like full on results based resume because we are looking at skills and your competencies, but results are still important. And for those of you who are going into the full boot camp, that's going to be really important to think about what you were learning during the boot camp experience, the results of your projects, what did you learn? How did you troubleshoot? Problem solving is significant, and one of the things that hiring managers are trying to see in your resume, in your interviews. So think about that too, because that's something that's a really great way to show how you're able to produce results when you're in those challenging situations. Okay, and then, so maybe you're thinking, well, okay, that's great, Amanda, but I didn't really have sole responsibility for anything. It was really, I was a part of it, but I wasn't the leader of it or anything like that. Here's where you can still qualify that work that you've done, list that work that you've done, but be authentic to that process, right? So kind of exactly like it says here, contributed to, helping to, that can precede what you're talking about to show that you weren't the sole individual with that. But I would also say then if you're going to do that, think about the pieces that you were solely responsible for and how can we talk about those results, right? Because there is a piece of that. No matter what our role is in a team, we have all had a direct impact on the outcome. And on your resume, you want to share those. So think about this. There's so much of a reflection piece that is part of resume writing that really takes a lot of time. And it's okay to brag on yourselves a little bit. In fact, that's what a resume is there, is to talk about who you are and your accomplishments. So if anything, you're doing yourself a disservice if you aren't sharing those things, right? Okay, I promise we are close, y'all. We are close-ish. Technically, think I'm supposed to keep you till 9, but we'll see. I don't know if anybody's gonna get mad at me if we don't go totally till 9. But if you want to, I will stay. No, just kidding. Okay, so for this last breakout session, this is where you're really going to have more of that self-reflection time. And I am going to spend a few minutes talking about kind of some of these areas and my kind of experience, but also kind of some personal, not, they're still professional thoughts, but my personal experiences with some of these as a hiring manager before for positions. You'll notice on the bottom of that template that there is an area for you to talk about, well, they put the summary statement at the bottom. I told you to work on it at the top. Sorry, there have been multiple versions of this. And I do think that is important, especially going into the boot camp for those of you or whatever positions you're applying for. So we have a good sense of who you are. Sections of your resume that you might want to add are sections that individuals consider rapport building sections. So that statement at the very beginning is a rapport building statement. You're sharing who you are. There are some individuals who think that there's a place on your resume for more of that. And I think it just depends how much of that you would put on there, or is it even relevant to the positions that you're applying for? That's what I always keep in the back of my mind. What is the relevancy of what I am sharing in my materials right now? So some people will include a section on self-management or transferable or job-related skills. For those particular areas, I think it's a little bit stronger to try to go ahead and incorporate those into the accomplishment statements that we're going to be working on here, because again, it shows directly what did you do? What did you accomplish? You accomplished this by using these skills. I think that's a more kind of natural way to include them rather than just listing a whole bunch of competencies. Anybody can list any competencies. I want to really know how you've used them and how you've grown them. Some people will include like community experiences. That's fine too, right? Does it have relevancy to the job that you're applying for, right? I do all sorts of things, but me volunteering at my local theater probably doesn't have anything to do with applying for a software developer job unless it's at a theater. Maybe that would be the relevancy there. Absolutely. But something in a totally different field, I'm probably not going to put that on my resume unless I am applying for a position that is heavy on volunteer experiences and it connects, right? Some of the other topics and areas that you will see on resumes and that some individuals might suggest that you include: hobbies, travel, athletic achievements, or awards. Those I'm going to try to steer away from my personal opinion on those ones. If there is relevancy to the position that you are applying for, or it is relevant to your story and who you are, then absolutely, I think it's important to be on there. But if you are 35 years old and you are listing the high school state cross country meet that you won, that's not relevant at all, right? Sure, that was an award and that was a great athletic achievement 35 years ago, but not helpful now. Even maybe some of those college, if you were in college athletics or some of your college awards, experiences may or may not be relevant. I know we're all kind of smiling here. So just think really significantly about them. That's not to say they don't have a place. What is the relevancy? The other thing to think about here is just being really mindful about what you are putting on that resume. I will always say to everyone, be true to who you are. Absolutely. Stand up for what you believe in and be yourself. That is so incredibly important. Just remember that things that you put on your resume, while they may not feel controversial to you, may be very controversial to others. And so that's something that you need to think really carefully about before you put it on your resume. You make that choice. I'm not telling you one way or the other what to do, but I have to, as a professional in this field, make you aware of kind of what could have occurred. Decide, oh my gosh, what could occur depending on what you put on your resume. And I think we are all well aware of maybe what some of those topics might be, but if you want to talk one-on-one about, whether it's relevant, whether or not it's something that you should include, by all means, we absolutely can. Personally, I don't have hobbies on my resume. I just haven't really found a spot for that. I haven't found that it was something that was needed. Instead, I might put things like my volunteer experience, especially if it connects again to the job that I'm applying for. Or I'll use my LinkedIn account to highlight some of those other pieces that are more kind of personal about me, that I think they have more of a stronger presence there, as opposed to my resume where I might just be using valuable space or something else. So make your decisions wisely. So with this next section here, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, you all tell me, how much time would you like to work on your accomplishment statements, rapport building areas, if you decide that's something you want to do? 45? I'm just kidding. No, we're not doing 45. Does 20 sound good? Again, kind of check in after 20 minutes. Okay. Again, I'm here to look at those if you want now, or again, you can work on them and we will look at them. You can send it to me when you're done and I can spend some time with it, and we can spend time one-on-one too. Hey there, Pat. All right, I'm going to pause and I will be here if you have questions. Okay, so we have just finished up our last breakout session where, we were focusing on making sure that we've taken those responsibility statements tonight, maybe just thinking about how we can turn them into accomplishment statements, or really digging deep and figuring out, what else did I do in my job that really sets me apart from someone else? And so really continue to think about this over the course of the next week. What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? How does it tie to these new skills that you've developed? For those of you who I'm going to be seeing in the various boot camps here in the next couple of months, start thinking about the types of positions that you might be interested in. Go on LinkedIn or Indeed and just start looking at the jobs for a software developer or a web developer, getting a sense for what is out there, and then be spending time thinking about, what you had done in the past, what you've learned now, or expect to learn in the boot camps in the future, and see how that ties to those job descriptions and how you can connect all those amazing skills you already have to those future jobs. And though it seems like way early to be thinking about that. I really, really believe that the more that you immerse yourself into these new professional worlds you're thinking about, doing it now when times are maybe not quite as stressful as when you were in the boot camp, or alternatively, if you're not going to do the boot camp, while these new skills that you've learned over the course of the last several weeks are still really fresh, it will actually help kind of inspire you to figure out kind of where it is you want to go. And for those of you who are like maybe thinking about, I don't know how to write what I've done in the way you've been telling me to tonight, Amanda, those job descriptions really will help. If I'm stuck, always look out for someone else to help or some other resource, and you can always reach out to me. So that's something that I really want all of you to take away from this tonight. Our last bit of information tonight really is just about kind of those next steps. So you've all gone through the PreSkill program. You know, there's several of you who've already shared with me that you are joining one of our upcoming boot camps, whether it's the part-time program that begins on Friday, which is crazy to think, but super fun, where that program is a little bit longer. Or starting in January, we will have two new cohorts, one of our Java language and another of our C#.net. So if you are thinking about those, definitely whichever admissions representative you had been working with for PreSkill, that would be your person to connect with. If you're not sure who that is, you can always reach out to me. We've spent some time together. And of course, you all have been working with Zach, and he's a wonderful person to talk to as well. Just like, well, I shouldn't say just like, but with our boot camps, they are offered online. They're also offered in person. So if you worked better with kind of maybe some like one-on-one learning or having a person there, or maybe you just want the option to go into a physical location once or twice a week. I work mostly from my home office, but sometimes I just want to be around people. So I go to our Cleveland campus. We do have physical campuses both in Columbus and in Cleveland. So you can go there every day. We have people who do that. You could have like a hybrid situation, or 100% remote, if that is something that works for you. I often get the question kind of like, well, what do graduates do? Hopefully you can see this and it's not too late. I'm not sharing my screen with you all. Why did nobody tell me that? Y'all are too nice. You didn't miss anything on the other one. But for here, these are typical positions that our boot camp graduates will go into. And there's just so many that you can do, not just a software development. So if you decide you want to go through the full stack program, or you've been wondering about like, what are the types of positions that are associated with. This is just a very small sampling of what some of our We Can Code It graduates have gone through. Freelance web developer, if you're more interested on the front end of things, data operations specialist, desktop support, analytical developers, systems engineer. There's really a whole literal world of opportunities. And you're not limited to whatever language it is that you select. So great story. I was working with one of our August grads today, and he reached out to me to tell me that he was one of our Java students in our full-time program. And he reached out to me today to let me know he had gotten a job, and he is starting with Chase as a C# developer, which was kind of crazy, but you know, he's going to be learning and they're going to be teaching him all of that. But again, he had the foundation, he had the skills, and as software developers, software developers are always learning new languages or platforms. I mean, it is a forever learning process. So it was really cool to think, and he's not the only one that that has happened to before. We've had alums that have gone through that. So it's just a really, really amazing field. Lots of great work is available, and our programs really do prepare you to go out in the workforce for such a variety of fields. And also what I really love too is that depending on what your backgrounds are, there are really great positions available that might utilize your previous skills and skill sets with your newfound coding skills, or of course, the ones that you've learned in our PreSkill program too. Are there, oops, sorry, these are just a few of our partners. Hopefully you all are not seeing, oh my gosh, there we go. So some of our employer partners, and these are both in Cleveland and Columbus, you can see there, but part of what the team I'm on works so hard to do is to connect with these individuals that are in the hiring positions to find out what it is that they need from our graduates and to make sure that you are prepared for that, to prepare for the interview process. So not only do we still talk about resumes and LinkedIn, but we work with you one-on-one to prepare for those interviews, behavioral interviews, working through the process. And we're just really fortunate to have strong partnerships with not just our Cleveland and Columbus folks, but really across the entire state of Ohio. And as we've had more and more students now that we're remote in other parts of the country, working on those relationships as well. So that is really the bulk of our evening tonight. Let me get to my last slide here. So you have my contact information. So I do want to share one link with you. So you've all got my email address there. It's just amanda@wecancodeit.org. You can call me if you've got questions. When I remember to turn the app on my computer, just kidding. So much technology these days. But I'm also going to put in the chat for everyone a link to my appointment calendar. So it's super easy if you ever are like, hey, I want to talk to you more about my resume, or what are next steps for me, or you just you want to learn more about We Can Code It. Definitely schedule an appointment with me. If you can't find a time that's working on my calendar, just reach out to me directly. If you all are in Slack, I'm in Slack as well. It's just, if you're on the We Can Code It Slack channels, whatever, it's just at Amanda. So you can always send me a Slack as well. But you all have done great work these last several weeks. You've got amazing skills already, and just know that I am still here to help you learn how to showcase those skills, no matter what you decide you want to do. For those of you who I'm going to see here in a few weeks, days, months, whatever it ends up being, still continue working on that resume, and you and I can continue, well, for all of us, you and I can continue working on it together. But what will be really lovely for those of you who are going into the full stack program or thinking about going into the full stack program, you will really have so much time to really make that resume what you want to do, and you'll be really a step ahead because you've got the foundation and now you've got time to really put it all together. Yeah. So that is it. 8:49, that's pretty good. I think we're a little early. It's not 8:30, but I think technically I'm supposed to keep you till 9. Are there questions that anybody has for me before we head out for the evening? Who's going to sleep after this? Anyone? Wind down first. Yeah, right. You've got my appointment calendar there. You've got my email address. Please make sure that you've shared those documents with me. And I really am serious. I would love to continue working with each of you on those documents. look at the job descriptions for these new fields just as you have time so you know what's out there. And if you've ever got questions about that job search process, please feel free to reach out to me. I spend a whole lot of time looking at those job descriptions and connecting with employers, and I'd love to continue helping each of you. Thank you, Janae. Thank you to everyone tonight. Yes, I can do that. And actually what I'll do, let's see. Lox, you sent me a question. Okay, let me get that for you here right now. I'm going to stop the recording.